How many sister ships did the classic Enterprise have? Well, in the first season episode, Tomorrow is Yesterday, Captain Kirk boasts that there were 12 of the Enterprise type. This gives us a number to play with. The Enterprise, NCC 1701, is the first on our list, being the first ship introduced, so this leaves 11 to be accounted for. In this video, we will attempt to identify those starships confirmed on screen to be Constitution class. We will tally up the ships in the Classic series, cast an eye over the Operation Retrieve ships, consider batches, and then finally indulge in fun speculation. The episode Court Martial offers us a display panel on which 10 hull registries are visible. The information on this display formed the core for an article written in 1975 by Greg Jen and reproduced on the website trekplace.com. If you have not read this article, then I would urge you to do so, although only after you've watched this video. It was not made explicit in the episode that these hull registries were exclusively Constitution-class vessels, only that they were under repair at Starbase 11, and it would have been a remarkable coincidence if the bulk of the Constitution starships happened to be in need of repair at the same time and at the same facility. It should also be noted that the digitally restored version of Court Martial has a Constitution-class ship behind the Enterprise in the opening teaser. A hull registry is just visible, but I haven't identified it, so if anyone knows that ship, please feel free to tell me in the comments section below. It could be the USS Intrepid, which was mentioned as being under repair at Starbase 11, but we will come to her shortly. Class name convention suggests that if there is a Constitution class, there must have been a lead ship called the Constitution. It is frequently suggested her hull registry was NCC 1700, which might make the Enterprise the second ship of her class. Although we do not see the Constitution on screen, and I will make a suggestion for why later, we can suppose she existed, so now there are 10 starships to be accounted for. In the episode The Doomsday Machine, we saw the constellation NCC 1017. This hull registry really ought to have been NCC 1710, which would have been logical and easier for the model makers working with the AMT model kit, merely a switch of the last 2 digits. But alas, we got NCC 1017. But now with the doomed constellation, we have 9 ships left. The immunity syndrome introduced us, or reintroduced us, to the Intrepid, NCC 1631. She was destroyed close to the Gamma 7A star system. Now there are 8 left. A quartet of Constitution-class vessels appeared in the Ultimate Computer. The Hood, NCC 1703, the Lexington, NCC 1709, the Excalibur, NCC 1664, and the Potemkin, NCC 1657, all of which had sensible hull registries, and all of which took part in a war game against the Enterprise, which was under the control of the M5 computer. So now we are left with 4 Constitution-class vessels to identify. The Omega Glory gave us the Exeter, NCC 1672. 3 ships to go. In the 3rd season episode, The Tholian Web, the Enterprise investigated the Defiant, NCC 1764, a starship bound in by a spatial interphase, and destined to travel backwards through time and into an alternative reality, where she would have a few unexpected adventures. Now we have 2 starships left, and one of those should be the Yorktown, NCC 1717. She was mentioned in the episode Obsession, and assuming the later Enterprise A really was the renamed and remanned Yorktown of Star Trek IV The Voyage Home, then we can be confident the Yorktown was a sister ship of the Enterprise. Now we have one starship left to identify. So what was this remaining starship? Was she the Republic, NCC 1371, as mentioned in court-martial? Do we know for a fact she was a Constitution-class starship? There is on-screen evidence that the Republic was still operational as late as Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country, by which time she would have been quite elderly. As Greg Jen points out in his article, Stephen Whitfield stated in The Making of Star Trek that starships of the Enterprise type had existed for 40 years by the time of the classic series. Another possibility is the Farragut NCC 1647, another ship from early in Kirk's eventful career, which the Star Trek Encyclopedia identified as a Constitution class. There does not seem to be much evidence in the series or the films for this, but if we must choose between the two, the Farragut seems the more reasonable, assuming the Farragut survived the events ascribed to her. In the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Relics, Captain Picard sat with Montgomery Scott on a holodeck recreation of the classic series Enterprise bridge, and made the comment that one of these ships was, in his time, in a museum. Did he mean a pre-refit Constitution class, or a post-refit? Which of the Enterprise sisters became that museum ship? What of Operation Retrieve of Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country? This cutscene gave us extra starship names, and strongly implied they were Constitution class. First, the Eagle, with its remarkably low hull registry of NCC 956, and the Endeavour, with its more sensible NCC 1895. Greg Jen lists both these names in his 1975 article, and these names were toyed with by the writers of the classic series. The Operation Retrieve flip chart showed starships as black ship-shaped silhouettes. The Excelsior was marked down in the shape of an Excelsior-class starship. The Endeavour and the Potemkin, unknown Constitution-class vessel, both appear as Constitution-class shapes, as did the Eagle, the Emden, NCC 1856, and the Ahwahnee, NCC 2048. Another sheet showed the existence of the Korolev, NCC 2014, also shaped like a Constitution-class ship. It is not necessarily the case that a Constitution-class shape on a flip chart is absolute proof a ship belonged to the Constitution class, but as the draftsman had included an Excelsior-class shape for the Excelsior, then it is reasonable to suppose these other ships were sister ships of the Enterprise. But with the notable exception of the Potemkin, many of these ship names were new to us. If the Constitution class were 40 years old at the time of the classic series, as Stephen Whitfield wrote, then that would have made Constitution class ships 60 years old by the time of Star Trek III The Search for Spock, and nearly 70 years old by Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country. It would explain the absence of the Constitution, but be contradicted by the later established timeline that had the Enterprise launched in 2245. Yet, perhaps Kirk's 12 starships were only those remaining in commission at the time of Tomorrow is Yesterday. Perhaps the careers of Constitution-class starships were staggered, in different batches or flights, overlapping one another. The Ahwahnee's hull registry, NCC 2048, and that of the Korolev, NCC 2014 suggest post-Excelsior starships. The 12 vessels Captain Kirk boasts of might have been an initial batch or even a second batch. The Enterprise's refit in Star Trek The Motion Picture could have introduced a subclass or batch 3, the Enterprise class, to which many new Constitution-class ships, such as the Endeavour, the Hawani, and the Korolev, all belonged. So what is the answer to our question? Let's speculate, shall we? It seems initially there were 12 Constitution-class starships: the Enterprise, the Constitution, the Intrepid, the Exeter, the Constellation, the Defiant, the Hood, Lexington, Potemkin, and Excalibur, and the Yorktown, plus one unidentified ship that might have been either the Republic or the Farragut. The dating evidence in the dialogue suggests that 3 ships, the Constitution, the Republic, and/or the Farragut, were the earliest. What is interesting here is that all 3 have distinctly American names: Constitution for the US frigate and the US Constitution, Republic for the American Republic, and Farragut for the US Admiral David Farragut, he of Damn the Torpedoes fame. We can imagine a second batch of Constitution-class starships followed, including the Enterprise, and these formed the batch we saw in the original series, which, together with the initial batch, made 12 starships. By the time of Star Trek The Motion Picture, the Enterprise had been refitted, and so extensive was this refit that she constituted, no pun intended, a new subclass, the Batch 3, or Enterprise class. The Enterprise survived into the 2280s, and so it seems did the Potemkin and the Yorktown, and possibly even the Republic. And the latter 3 ships followed the Enterprise by being refitted to Enterprise-class standards. But now, Starfleet decided to build a few more Constitution-class ships, new starships, built from the keel up as Enterprise-class. And so we got an extra 5 vessels: the Eagle, the Endeavour, the Emden, the Awani, and the Korolev. So the answer to our question is now a little clearer. Over the course of her long career, the Enterprise had at least 17 confirmed sisters. Of course, personally, I would like there to have been a refit Constitution-class ship called the Kongo, of which there is on-screen evidence on the Starship Mission Assignment chart seen briefly in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. It might be the case that I will one day explore this chart in detail in a future video. But for now, I thank you for watching this video.